The message came on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. It arrived not through radio waves or digital signals, but through a small silver sphere that appeared in the sky above Geneva. The sphere floated down slowly like a leaf falling from a tree and landed in the courtyard of the United Nations building. When the security teams approached it, the sphere opened like a flower. Inside was a single sheet of metal with words burned into its surface. The words were in every human language at once, somehow readable to anyone who looked at them. You have been noticed. The message said. You are summoned to the Citadel of Voices. You will present yourselves for assessment. Coordinates follow. That was humanity's first contact with the Galactic Concord. Elena Vasquez was 47 years old when she received the call that would change her life. She had spent 20 years as a diplomat, working in some of the most difficult places on Earth. She had negotiated peace treaties between nations that had been at war for generations. She had sat across tables from dictators and revolutionaries and had kept her face calm through all of it. When the Secretary General asked her to lead humanity's delegation to the stars, she did not hesitate. She said, yes. The preparation took 6 months. Earth's greatest minds worked together to understand the coordinates the sphere had provided. They built a ship using instructions that came in a second sphere. A design that was clearly meant for beginners. The aliens had sent them a blueprint for a simple warp drive. The kind a child might build in whatever schools existed among the stars. Elena understood the insult hidden in that gift. The aliens were treating humanity like children. They were giving humans a toy to play with so the children could come visit the adults. She did not let it bother her. She had dealt with insults before. What mattered was the opportunity. The ship they built was named the first step. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a metal box with engines attached. Built in orbit by workers who had never imagined they would be constructing a starship. But it worked. When Elena and her delegation of 12 boarded it and activated the warp drive, the ship jumped across light years in an instant. They arrived at the coordinates to find something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. The Citadel of Voices was not a building. It was not a space station. It was a structure so large that Elena's mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. It was built around a dead star, a shell of metal and crystal and material she could not name that enclosed the entire stellar remnant. The surface of the shell was covered in cities, each one larger than any city on Earth. Ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Thousands of them. Millions of them coming and going in patterns too complex to follow. A voice spoke in Elena's mind. It was not sound. It was not words. It was pure meaning planted directly into her thoughts. Human vessel, you are expected. Proceed to docking bay 7412. Do not deviate from the assigned path. Elena nodded even though no one could see her. The first step moved forward, guided by signals from the Citadel. As they flew closer, Elena saw things that made her feel very small. She saw ships the size of moons. She saw creatures flying through space without any protection. Their bodies adapted to the void. She saw battles being fought in the distance, flashes of light that were probably weapons capable of destroying worlds. And she saw for the first time the true scale of the galaxy. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now Elena had her answer. They were not alone. They were not even special. They were one small species among hundreds, maybe thousands. And they were very, very late to the gathering. The docking bay was large enough to hold 100 ships like the first step. When Elena and her delegation walked down the ramp and onto the metal floor of the citadel, they were met by a creature that looked like a praying mantis made of polished bronze. "I am Facilitator Vex," the creature said. Its voice came from a device on its chest, translating its clicks and whistles into human speech. "I will guide you to the council chamber. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch anything. You will not make any sudden movements. Do you understand?" "We understand," Elena said. Facilitator Vex's head tilted in a way that might have been surprise. "Good. Follow me." They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered in artwork from 1,000 different species. Some of it was beautiful. Some of it was disturbing. Some of it was so alien that Elena could not even tell what she was looking at. Other beings passed them as they walked. Elena saw creatures made of light. She saw creatures made of stone. She saw something that looked like a floating cloud of eyes, each eye turning to watch the humans as they passed. None of these beings spoke to them. Most did not even acknowledge their existence. Elena kept her face calm. She had practiced this. She had spent months learning everything humanity knew about the galaxy, which was not much. She had studied the brief messages the Concord had sent, looking for clues about their culture, their values, their weaknesses. She had found very little, but she had found enough to know that the Concord was old, 11,000 years old. According to their own records, they had seen species rise and fall. They had seen empires born and destroyed. To them, humanity was just another new species. Another group of primitives crawling out of their gravity well for the first time. Elena intended to change their minds. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Elena had ever seen. It was a sphere. And they entered through a door near the bottom. The curved walls rose up and up, covered in platforms where representatives from hundreds of species sat or floated or hung. Light came from everywhere and nowhere. The air smelled like nothing Elena could identify. A mixture of scents from 100 different worlds. In the center of the chamber was a raised platform. Elena and her delegation were guided to stand on it. Above them, looking down, were the beings who ruled this part of the galaxy. Elena looked up and met the eyes of High Arbiter Keth Varos. He was tall. Nearly 3 m, with a body like an insect, but a face that was almost human in its expressiveness. His exoskeleton was deep blue, decorated with gold patterns that Elena guessed indicated his rank. His eyes were large and dark, and they looked at Elena the way a scientist might look at a bacteria under a microscope. "So," Keth Varos said. His voice was deep and resonant, translated by the same technology that let all beings in this chamber understand each other. "These are the humans." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Elena heard clicks and whistles and sounds she could not describe. She heard what might have been laughter. "Ambassador Elena Vasquez," she said, keeping her voice steady. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I thank the Concord for this opportunity to present ourselves." "Colonies," Keth Varos repeated. "You have colonies? How many worlds have you settled, human?" 17, Elena said. "More." Murmurs. More sounds that might have been laughter. 17 worlds. Keith Vero said. "The Valkyrie hegemony, whose representative sits to my left, controls 17,000 worlds. The crystalline hegemony controls 30,000. We have member species here whose empires span entire galactic arms. And you come to us with 17 worlds. Everyone starts somewhere, Elena said. This time the laughter was unmistakable. It came from all around her, from hundreds of different species, each expressing amusement in their own way. Some clicked, some howled, some released puffs of colored gas. One species, a group of beings made entirely of light, pulsed in patterns that the translator told Elena meant mockery. Elena stood still and waited for the laughter to fade. Kevvaros raised one of his forearms, and the chamber fell silent. You wish to join the Galactic Concord? He said. This is unusual. Most species do not ask to join. They are observed, evaluated, and eventually invited or not invited, as the case may be. But you have asked, and so according to our laws, we must assess you. We are ready, Elena said. Are you? Keith Viros leaned forward on his platform. Then let us begin. First question. How many extinction-level events has your species survived? Elena had prepared for this. 6, she said. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic super-eruptions, pandemic diseases, and 2 events caused by our own actions. 2 events caused by your own actions. Keith Varos repeated. You nearly destroyed yourselves twice. We learned from our mistakes, did you? Second question, what is the primary method by which your species obtains energy for biological function? Elena paused. She knew what this question was really asking. We consume organic matter. We eat plants and animals. The chamber erupted. This time it was not laughter. It was something worse. It was disgust. A being made of crystals spoke from somewhere above Elena. Its voice was like glass breaking. They are consumers, predators. They kill and eat other living things. Barbaric, another voice said. Primitive, said another. Dangerous, said a third. Keith Varos. Let the reactions continue for a long moment before silencing them again. Third question, he said. What is the most destructive weapon your species has developed? Elena considered her answer carefully. We have developed weapons capable of destroying cities, regions, and potentially our entire planet. We have not yet developed weapons capable of destroying other planets or stars. Not yet, Catharo said. But you intend to. We intend to be able to defend ourselves from whom? No one threatens you. No one has any interest in your 17 worlds. You are too small to be worth conquering and too primitive to be worth trading with. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. She pushed it down. We hope that will change, she said. Keith Viros made a sound that might have been a sigh. Hope. Yes, new species always have hope. They come to us believing they are special, that they have something to offer the galaxy. They believe their art, their culture, their technology will impress us. And then they learn the truth. He stood up on his platform, towering over the chamber. The truth is this, human. Your species is unremarkable. You are carbon-based biological organisms with a limited lifespan and limited intelligence. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is violent. Your history is filled with war and destruction. You have nothing to offer the Concord that we have not seen 1,000 times before. Elena said nothing. However, Keth Varos continued. Our laws require us to give you a chance. We will observe your species for a period of 500 standard years. At the End of that time, if you have not destroyed yourselves and if you have demonstrated sufficient progress, we may consider your application for membership. 500 years, Elena said, is that a problem? Elena looked up at the High Arbiter. She looked at the hundreds of alien species watching her, waiting for her to accept this insult with a bow and a thank you. She thought about the millions of humans who had worked so hard to make this moment possible, who had dreamed of meeting other intelligent life, who had hoped for friendship and alliance and had instead found contempt. She thought about everything humanity had survived. We request the trial of standing, she said. The chamber went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Every being, every translator, every system in that vast space seemed to stop working at once. Keith Viros's dark eyes widened. What did you say? The trial of standing. Elena repeated. Article 7 of the Founding Charter of the Galactic Concord. Any species may invoke the trial of standing to demonstrate their worth through action rather than assessment. The trial must be accepted if properly requested. We properly request it. Keith Varos stared at her. Around him, other council members were consulting devices, speaking to advisors, checking records that had not been accessed in thousands of years. How do you know about the trial of standing? Keith Viros demanded. Your laws are not secret, Elena said. We read them. A being made of swirling gas spoke up. The trial of standing has not been invoked in 6,000 years. It is obsolete. It should not apply, but it does apply. Another voice said, this one came from a creature that looked like a tree with too many branches. The law was never removed. It remains part of our charter. If the humans invoke it, we must honor it. More arguments erupted around the chamber. Elena stood on her platform and waited. She had gambled everything on this moment on a law she had found buried in files the Concord had sent along with their summons. Someone somewhere in the Concord bureaucracy had included their full legal code in the information package. Perhaps they thought no one would read it. Perhaps they did not care. Elena had read every word. Finally, Keith Varos raised his arms again. The chamber fell silent. The human has invoked a valid legal procedure, he said. His voice was cold now. All pretense of patience gone. We are bound by our own laws to accept. The trial of standing will take place in 3 rotations. The humans will present their demonstration. The full council will attend. He looked down at Elena and for the first time she saw something other than contempt in his eyes. She saw anger. I do not know what you think you will accomplish. He said, you are a species of primitives from a small and unimportant world. You have no technology that could impress us. You have no art that we have not seen before. You have nothing. Elena met his gaze. In 3 rotations, she said, we will show you what we have. Keith Varos made a gesture of dismissal. Take the humans back to their ship. Give them quarters in the visitor section. Make sure they are comfortable. The last word was not quite a threat, but it was close. As Elena and her delegation were escorted out of the chamber, she heard the sounds of conversation resuming. Behind her, she heard laughter again, the same mockery as before. The aliens were already making jokes about what the primitives might try to present. She heard bets being placed. She heard predictions of failure and humiliation. Elena smiled. She did not let anyone see it. When they were back in their quarters, a small suite of rooms that seemed to have been designed for a species much larger than humans. Elena gathered her delegation. They took the bait. She said, "Are you sure this will work?" asked Dr. Chen, the delegation's science advisor. "We are asking a lot of people to do something very difficult." "I am sure." Elena said, "I have seen what humanity can do when we decide to work together. I have seen it in wars and disasters and moments of crisis. When we choose to be united, nothing can stand against us." She pulled out a small communication device, one that humanity scientists had spent months developing. It used quantum entanglement, a technology the Concorde probably considered primitive, but it would reach Earth instantly across any distance. Elena activated the device and spoke clearly. "This is Ambassador Vasquez." They accepted. Begin the march across human space. On 17 colonized worlds and hundreds of ships and stations, the message was received and humanity began to move. No one in the Galactic Concorde noticed. Why would they? The humans were primitives after all. They had nothing to offer. They were a joke, a brief entertainment for ancient beings who had seen everything. In 3 days, they would learn how wrong they were. The message spread across human space like fire through dry grass. On Earth, it reached the major cities first. New York, Beijing, Mumbai, Lagos, Sao Paulo. Government officials received encrypted communications. Military commanders were briefed in secure rooms. But the message was not meant only for the powerful. Within hours, it had spread to ordinary people, passed from phone to phone and screen to screen. The march has been called, "Humanity Needs You." On the colony world of New Eden, a farmer named Marcus Chen was working in his fields when his communicator buzzed. He read the message twice, then put down his tools and walked back to his house. His wife was already packing. "You saw it too," he said. "Everyone saw it," she replied. "The whole colony is talking about nothing else. Ships are being prepared. They say the journey will take 2 days." Marcus looked out the window at the fields he had spent 10 years cultivating. Crops were ready for harvest. If he left now, much of it would be lost. Months of work gone. "We should go," his wife said. "This is important." Marcus nodded. He had never been a soldier. He had never been a politician or a scientist or anyone important. He was just a farmer on a small colony world trying to build a life for his family. But he was also human. And when humanity called, he would answer. "Start packing," he said. "I need to talk to the neighbors." Across New Eden, similar conversations were happening. Families made decisions. Workers left their jobs. Students left their schools. Not everyone went. Some could not. Some chose not to, but enough did. Enough to fill the colony's small fleet of transport ships and still leave thousands waiting for more. The same scene played out on every human world on Mars, the oldest colony. The response was overwhelming. Millions volunteered. Within the first hour, the colony's governor had to issue statements asking people to be patient, promising that everyone who wanted to go would have a chance. On the Generation ship Eternal Voyage, which had been traveling between stars for 300 years, the crew held a meeting in the central chamber. The ship could not turn around. It could not reach the Citadel in time. But they wanted to be part of this moment, even from a distance. They decided to record a message, millions of voices speaking in unison, to be transmitted across the stars. On the research station orbiting Jupiter, scientists who had dedicated their lives to studying the gas giant put aside their work. Some of them were old, some were sick. It did not matter. They found passage on supply ships heading toward Earth and on Earth itself. The response was beyond anything the organizers had expected. The plan had been developed in secret over the 6 months of preparation for the diplomatic mission. Elena Vasquez and a small group of trusted advisors had anticipated this moment. They had known the aliens would mock humanity. They had known the assessment would be designed to humiliate, and they had prepared a response. The trial of standing was the key. The law was ancient, written into the Concord's founding charter by a species called the Primarchs. No one knew much about the Primarchs anymore. They had vanished thousands of years ago, leaving behind only fragments of their technology and their legal code. But their laws remained in effect, honored by a bureaucracy that prided itself on never changing. The trial of standing allowed any species to demonstrate their worth through action. It did not specify what kind of action. It did not set any rules or requirements. It simply said that the species must present a demonstration of their nature and capabilities to the full council. Elena had thought long and hard about what demonstration would be most effective. Humanity could not compete with the Concord's technology. Their ships were primitive. Their weapons were weak. Their science was thousands of years behind. Any display of human technology would only confirm the aliens' belief that humans were inferior. Humanity could not compete with the Concord's art or culture. The galaxy had seen millions of species produce art and music and literature. Nothing humans created would be new or impressive to beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. So Elena had asked herself a different question. What could humans do that the aliens could not? What quality did humanity possess that was truly unique? The answer had come to her in the middle of the night, waking her from a dream she could not remember. She had sat up in bed, heart pounding, knowing exactly what they needed to do. Humanity's strength was not in their technology or their art. It was in their ability to choose, to cooperate, to act as one, not because they were forced to, but because they decided to. The aliens of the Concord were powerful, but they were also divided. Hundreds of species, each with their own agendas and conflicts. They worked together because their laws required it, not because they wanted to. Their unity was imposed from above, maintained by rules and traditions, and the threat of punishment. Human unity was different. It came from below. It came from individuals making a choice to stand together. It was messy and imperfect and often failed. But when it worked, when millions of humans decided to act as one, it was something the galaxy had never seen. The demonstration would be simple. Humans would come to the Citadel, as many as possible, and they would walk into the council chamber in perfect silence, not enforced silence, not silence imposed by technology or discipline. Chosen silence. Millions of individuals, each one capable of making noise. Each one deciding not to. Elena knew it would work because she understood something about silence that the aliens did not. Silence was not empty. Silence was not weakness. Silence was control. Silence was power held back. When a predator was silent, it meant they were hunting. When a human was silent, it meant they were waiting. The aliens had laughed at humanity. They would not laugh at silence. But first, humanity had to get there. And that was where the real challenge began. The Citadel of Voices was far from human space. Even with the warp drive the aliens had provided, the journey took days. Normal passenger ships could not make the trip. Military vessels had limited capacity. The logistics of moving millions of people across interstellar distances in just 3 days seemed impossible. It was impossible by normal standards. But humanity had never been good at accepting limits. Within hours of Elena's message, a global coordination effort was underway. Governments that had been rivals for generations put aside their differences. Military commanders shared resources. Private companies offered their ships for free. Scientists worked around the clock to optimize warp routes and minimize travel times. The first fleet launched from Earth orbit 12 hours after the message was sent. It carried 50,000 people, packed into cargo ships and military transports, and even a few luxury yachts whose owners had volunteered their vessels. They jumped to warp and vanished into the stars. More fleets followed from Mars, from the Moon, from the orbital stations and the asteroid mining outposts. From every corner of human-controlled space, ships were launching, all heading for the same destination. Not everyone could go in a ship. There were not enough vessels to carry everyone who wanted to participate. But the organizers had planned for this. Those who could not travel in person were asked to contribute in other ways. They recorded messages of support. They helped coordinate logistics. They kept human civilization running while millions of their fellow humans journeyed to the stars. And they waited, watching, hoping. On the Citadel, Elena Vasquez spent the 3 days preparing. She met with her delegation, reviewing every detail of their plan. She studied the council chamber, learning its layout, its acoustics, its sightlines. She practiced her speech until she could deliver it in her sleep. She also watched the aliens. The Citadel was full of them. Representatives of hundreds of species going about their business. Most ignored the human quarters entirely. A few stopped to stare at the primitives with expressions of curiosity or contempt. 1 or 2 seemed almost sympathetic, though Elena could not be sure she was reading their alien faces correctly. The jokes about humanity continued. Elena heard them everywhere. The betting pools had grown with hundreds of species wagering on what foolish thing the humans would try to do. The most popular theory was that the humans would attempt a weapons demonstration, showing off their primitive nuclear technology. The second most popular theory was that they would perform some kind of cultural display, singing or dancing or reciting poetry. No one expected what was actually coming. On the second day, the first human ships began arriving at the Citadel. The conquered traffic control systems registered them with the same board efficiency they applied to all new arrivals. Human vessel primitive warp drive. Destination docking bay 7412. Proceed along the assigned path. Then more ships arrived and more and more. By the end of the second day, the traffic controllers were no longer bored. They were confused. How many human ships are there? One controller asked another. I don't know. The count keeps going up. There must be some error in the sensors, but there was no error. The humans kept coming. Small ships and large ships. Military vessels and civilian transports, ships that had no business making interstellar journeys. Held together by improvised repairs and desperate hope, the Citadel's docking systems began to struggle. There were not enough bays for all the human ships. Traffic control had to open emergency facilities. Areas that had not been used in centuries. Ships were packed together in ways that violated safety regulations. No one complained. The humans just kept coming. High Arbiter Keth Varos received reports about the human arrivals. He read them with growing annoyance. What are they doing? He demanded of his advisors. Why are so many of them coming? We don't know. An advisor replied. The humans have been surprisingly secretive about their plans. We know only that they are gathering in large numbers. This is absurd. There is no precedent for this. A trial of standing is meant to be a simple demonstration, not an invasion. Shall we turn them away? We could close the docking bays, refuse entry to additional ships. Kevvaros considered it. Part of him wanted to do exactly that, to slam the door in the humans' faces and end this farce before it went any further. But the laws of the Concord were clear. The trial of standing must be allowed to proceed without interference. Any attempt to limit human access could be seen as a violation. No, he said finally. Let them come. Let them fill the citadel with their primitives. When their demonstration fails, as it surely will, the humiliation will be even greater. His advisors nodded and withdrew. Kevvaros sat alone in his chamber, staring at the reports. Something about this situation bothered him. The humans had shown unexpected knowledge of Concord law. They had invoked an obscure procedure that most species did not even know existed. And now they were bringing millions of their people across interstellar distances. A feat of logistics that should have been beyond their capabilities. What were they planning? He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. Whatever the humans tried, it would fail. The Concord had seen thousands of species come and go. They had seen demonstrations of every kind. Nothing the humans could do would be new or impressive. The trial would proceed. The humans would fail. And then this foolish species would learn its place in the galaxy. On the third day, Elena Vasquez woke early. She dressed carefully in a simple black uniform, the same one every member of the human delegation would wear. She ate a small breakfast and reviewed her notes one last time. Then she went to meet the others. The gathering point was a large chamber near the docking bays, one of the emergency facilities that had been opened to handle the flood of human arrivals. When Elena arrived, it was already full. Humans, thousands of them. Tens of thousands. They stood in neat rows, waiting in silence. Elena walked among them, looking at their faces. She saw soldiers in uniform, and farmers in work clothes. She saw scientists and artists and teachers and children. She saw people of every nation and ethnicity. Every age and background. They had come from every corner of human space, traveling for days through the cold void between stars. They had come because she asked and aide approached her. Ambassador. The final count is in. 11,423,816. Humans are now present at the Citadel. It's more than we expected. We're still working out how to fit everyone into the council chamber. They don't all need to fit inside. Elena said, we'll fill the chamber first, then the corridors, then every space we can reach. The aliens will see them. That's what matters. Understood. Elena looked at the aide. He was young, barely 30, a junior diplomat who had never expected to be part of something like this. His face was nervous but determined. Are you ready? She asked. Yes, Ambassador. Good. She raised her voice so those nearby could hear. Remember the rules. No talking, no whispering, no coughing if you can help it. No shuffling your feet, no sound at all from the moment we start walking until I give the signal. We are silent. Can you do that? Heads nodded throughout the chamber. I know you can. Elena said. I know because I've seen what we're capable of. I've seen humanity at its worst. Yes, but I've also seen us at our best. I've seen us come together in times of crisis. I've seen us set aside our differences and work toward a common goal. That's what we're doing today. Not for glory, not for power, for each other, for everyone back home who's watching and hoping. For our children and grandchildren who will grow up in a galaxy that either respects us or doesn't. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The aliens think we're primitives. They think we're barbarians. They think we're nothing but noise and violence and chaos. Today, we're going to show them what we really are. We're going to show them humanity. Silent, united, unbreakable. No one cheered. No one applauded. They had already begun. The silence started there. In that crowded chamber and spread outward like a wave. Millions of humans. Closing their mouths and stilling their bodies and waiting for the moment that would change everything. Elena took her place at the front of the gathering. Behind her, the ranks formed up. Row after row after row of humans in black uniforms. They stretched back through the chamber and out into the corridors beyond. A tide of silent figures waiting to walk forth. She took a deep breath. "Follow me," she said. The last words any human would speak for hours. And then she walked forward toward the council chamber, toward the aliens who had laughed at humanity. Behind her, 11 million humans followed in perfect silence. The council chamber was ready. The observation platforms were filled with representatives from 400 species. Each one watching the great doors at the bottom of the sphere with expressions of amusement or boredom or mild curiosity. The lighting had been adjusted. The translation systems calibrated. The recording devices activated. Everything was in place for what most expected to be a brief and entertaining failure. High Arbiter Keth Varro sat on his elevated platform, looking down at the empty central stage where the humans would present their demonstration. Around him, other senior members of the council chatted among themselves, discussing politics and trade and the thousand small matters that occupied the attention of galactic governance. The humans were a distraction, nothing more. A brief interruption to the normal business of the conquered. Soon they would perform their little demonstration. Everyone would have a good laugh, and the primitives would be sent back to their 17 worlds to wait out their 500-year observation period. Keith Viros checked the time. The humans were due to arrive in moments. A Valkyrie diplomat floated over on a gravity platform. Her species was serpentine, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with their emotions. Right now, her scales were a bright, amused yellow. "I have placed a substantial wager on the outcome," she said. "My prediction is that they will attempt to impress us with their nuclear weapons. Perhaps a holographic display of their explosions. Very primitive species always want to show off their bombs." "A reasonable prediction," Keith Varos replied. "Though some believe they will attempt a cultural display. Singing perhaps. I am told humans make sounds with their mouths that they consider pleasing." "How charming," the Valkyrie said, her scales rippling with amusement. "I look forward to being entertained." She floated away, returning to her designated platform. Keith Varos watched her go, then turned his attention back to the doors. They opened. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked in first, alone, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. She walked slowly, deliberately, her face calm, and her eyes fixed straight ahead. She wore a simple black uniform, identical to the ones worn by her delegation. No medals. No decorations, no symbols of rank or achievement. She reached the central platform and stopped. Behind her, the doors remained open, and through them came more humans. They walked in formation, rows of 10, each row, following the one before with precise spacing. They wore the same black uniforms as their ambassador. Their faces were calm, their movements controlled. They made no sound. No sound at all. The council members noticed the silence first. It was subtle at first, easy to dismiss. Of course, the humans were being quiet. They were in a formal setting. They were trying to be respectful. That was normal. But then, more humans entered and more and more. And the silence continued. 10,000 humans walked into the chamber. Then 20,000. Then 50,000. They filled the central floor and spread outward, taking up every available space. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a sea of black-clad figures, and they made no sound. The Valkyrie diplomat's scales shifted from yellow to orange, a sign of confusion. She turned to her neighbor, a crystalline being whose body caught the light like a prism. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what exactly?" "I hear nothing. Not a single footstep, not a breath, not a heartbeat." The crystalline being paused, focusing its senses. Its species perceived the world primarily through vibrations. They could feel sound in ways other species could not imagine. And what it felt now was something it had never experienced before. Silence, perfect, complete silence from hundreds of thousands of biological organisms. "That's impossible." The crystalline being said, "Biological creatures cannot suppress all sound. They breathe. Their hearts beat. Their joints make noise when they move. And yet," the Valkyrie said, "listen." Around the chamber, similar conversations were happening. Species that communicated through sound-based dominance displays found themselves unable to assert their presence. Species that relied on detecting the life sounds of other beings to navigate social situations were suddenly blind. The chamber, which was always filled with a background hum of biological noise, was silent for the first time in 11,000 years. High Arbiter Kathos leaned forward on his platform, his antenna twitching. His species used sound as a primary tool of social hierarchy. The louder one could make oneself, the more dominant one was considered. In his 600 years of life, he had never encountered a situation where an opponent simply refused to make any sound at all. The humans kept coming. The chamber's AI, an ancient system that had managed Concord proceedings since the founding, began to issue alerts. Capacity limits were being approached. The central floor was full. Humans were now spilling into the side chambers, the emergency corridors, the maintenance passages. They were everywhere, walking in that same silent formation, filling every available space. 1 million humans. Then 2 million, then 3. Keith Varos demanded a status report. "How many of them are there?" "Current count is approximately 4 million in the chamber complex." The AI reported additional humans are arriving continuously. Total population of humans currently present at the Citadel is estimated at 11 million. 11 million. Kev Varos repeated. And they are all doing this. Analysis indicates that all human individuals present are maintaining deliberate silence. No vocalizations detected. Locomotion is being achieved through specialized footwear designed to minimize sound. Respiration is being controlled to reduce audible breathing. Heart rates appear elevated but are being masked through some unknown method. The AI paused, processing additional data. It should be noted that this level of coordinated silence among Biological organisms is unprecedented in conquered records. No species in 11,000 years of recorded history has demonstrated comparable ability. Keveros said nothing. He watched as the humans continued to fill the chamber, an endless tide of silent figures. His scales, if he had possessed them, would have shifted from amusement to uncertainty. On the central platform, Elena Vasquez stood motionless. She had not spoken since entering the chamber. She did not move. She barely seemed to breathe. She simply waited, letting the silence do its work. The council members had stopped chatting among themselves. The betting pools were forgotten. The jokes died unspoken. Everyone was watching the humans now, trying to understand what they were seeing. A being made of living light pulsed a question into the chamber. What is happening? My people communicate through patterns of illumination. We do not understand silence, but I can feel something. Something in the absence of sound. What is it? No one answered. No one knew. The humans kept coming. 5 million, 6 million, 7 million. The corridors of the citadel were filled with them. Reports came in from distant sections of the massive structure. Humans walking in perfect formation through halls that had not seen visitors in centuries. Humans standing motionless in observation decks and transit stations and public spaces. Humans everywhere and not a single one making a sound. A species called the Melodians, whose entire culture was based on song, began to panic. Their representative, a tall being covered in harmonic resonators, fled the chamber. The silence was physically painful for their kind. Like a void that threatened to swallow them whole, other species were affected differently. The crystalline hegemony, whose members perceived the world through vibrations, found themselves effectively blind. They could not detect the humans at all. To their senses, the chamber was empty, but their visual sensors told them otherwise. The contradiction was disturbing in ways they could not articulate. The void dwellers, a species that lived in the empty spaces between stars, felt something different. They were accustomed to silence. They lived in silence. But this was not their silence. This was human silence. And human silence, they realized, was not empty. It was full of intention, full of control. Full of something they could not quite name but instinctively feared. 8 million humans, 9 million, 10 million. The chamber's AI announced that the maximum safe capacity had been reached. Additional humans were being directed to overflow areas throughout the citadel. The entire structure was now affected by the presence of the Silent March. Hi. Arbiter Keth Viros finally spoke. His voice, which had always been confident and commanding, sounded uncertain for the first time in centuries. Ambassador Vasquez. Elena turned her head slightly to acknowledge him. She did not speak. This is unprecedented. Keith Vero said, you have brought 11 million of your people to this place, and they are all maintaining this silence. How is this possible? What technology are you using? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since entering the chamber, she spoke. No technology. Her voice echoed in the silent chamber, clear and calm. What you see is choice. Each human here has chosen to be silent. They are not being controlled. They are not being forced. They are choosing of their own free will to make no sound. The council members looked at each other. Confusion evident on faces designed by 1,000 different evolutionary paths. That is impossible. A representative of the hive. Collective said. The collective was a species that operated as a single mind distributed across billions of bodies. They could coordinate because they were one consciousness. The idea of millions of independent minds choosing to act in perfect unison was incomprehensible to them. No species with individual consciousness can achieve such coordination without external control. It defies the fundamental nature of independent thought. And yet, Elena said, gesturing to the silent millions around her. Here we are. She stepped forward, moving closer to the edge of the platform. The humans behind her did not move. They stood like statues, like monuments, like a single organism made of 11 million individual cells. You asked about our technology. You asked about our weapons. You asked about our culture. You wanted to assess us, to measure us, to determine if we were worthy of joining your concord. Elena's voice was steady, her words precise. You were asking the wrong questions. Varos's antenna flattened against his head. In his species, this was a sign of defensive posture. He was feeling something he had not experienced in a very long time. He was feeling uncertain. What should we have asked? He said. Elena smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator revealing its teeth. You should have asked what humans do when they choose to work together. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. We are a young species. You are right about that. We have only been traveling between stars for a short time. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Our weapons are weak. Our science is far behind. She looked around at the assembled council members, meeting their eyes one by one. But we have something you do not understand. We have the ability to choose, not as a hive mind, not as a collective consciousness. As individuals, 11 million individual humans, each with their own thoughts and dreams and fears, chose to come here, chose to walk in formation, chose to be silent. Her voice grew stronger. No one ordered them to do this. No technology forced them. No genetic programming compelled them. They came because they wanted to, because humanity asked them to, because they understood what was at stake, and they decided to stand together. The silence that followed was profound. Not just the absence of sound from the humans, but a stunned silence. From the council itself, 400 species, thousands of representatives, millions of years of combined experience, and none of them knew what to say. A being made of crystal spoke up, its voice like breaking glass. You claim this is voluntary, but that cannot be true. Individuals do not sacrifice their freedom for the group unless they are forced or deceived. This is a fundamental truth of consciousness. Perhaps it is a truth for your species, Elena replied. It is not a truth for ours. She turned to face the crystalline being directly. On our world, we have a concept called love. It means caring about others more than you care about yourself. We have a concept called duty. It means doing what is right even when it is difficult. We have a concept called sacrifice. It means giving up something you value for the sake of something greater. Elena spread her arms encompassing the silent millions around her. Every human in this chamber left behind something to be here. Farmers left their crops. Parents left their children. Workers left their jobs. They traveled for days through the cold void of space, packed into crowded ships, knowing that they might never return home. And when they arrived, they were asked to do something simple but incredibly difficult. They were asked to be silent. Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper. But in the perfect silence of the chamber, everyone heard her clearly. They were asked to choose discipline over comfort, unity over individuality, purpose over impulse. And they said yes. 11 million times. They said yes. Hi. Arbiter Keth Varos rose from his platform. His full height was nearly 3 meters. An imposing figure designed by evolution to dominate through physical presence. But as he looked down at the small human woman in the sea of silent figures behind her, he did not feel dominant. He felt something else entirely. Why? He asked. His voice was quiet now, lacking its usual authority. Why would they do this? What do you hope to gain? Elena looked up at him. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. We hope to gain your respect, she said. Not through threats, not through displays of power, not through proving that we can destroy. We hope to gain it by showing you who we really are. She turned to face the full council, raising her voice so all could hear. You called us primitives. You called us barbarians. You laughed at our weapons and our technology and our small collection of worlds. And perhaps you were right. By your standards, we are primitive. We are young. We have much to learn. Her voice hardened. But we are not weak. And we are not alone. Every human in this chamber is connected to every other human. Not by technology or hive mind or genetic programming, but by something far stronger. We are connected by choice, by the decision to stand together, by the understanding that what we can accomplish as one is greater than what any of us can accomplish alone. She let the silence stretch for a long moment. This is humanity. This is what we offer the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology, not resources. We offer the example of what can be achieved when individuals choose to work together. When people decide to be more than the sum of their parts, when a species learns to be silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. The council chamber remained frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. The aliens stared at the humans. And the humans stared back. And the silence continued. And in that silence, something shifted. Something changed. The council members could not articulate what it was. But they could feel it. The balance of power in the chamber had tilted. The primitives from the small planet on the edge of the galaxy were no longer amusing. They were terrifying. Not because of what they could destroy, because of what they could become. Hi. Arbiter Keth Varos stood on his platform for a long time after Elena finished speaking. He was thinking in 600 years of life. He had learned to take his time with important decisions. He had seen young species make grand gestures. Before. He had seen demonstrations that seemed impressive at first but revealed themselves to be hollow tricks. He had to be sure this was different. He looked at the humans, 11 million of them, filling the chamber and the corridors. Beyond. They had not moved. They had not made a sound. They stood like statues carved from flesh and bone. Each one a perfect example of controlled stillness. He tried to imagine his own species doing something similar. The thought was almost laughable. His people were loud. They announced their presence with sounds designed to establish dominance. The idea of voluntarily silencing themselves, of suppressing their natural impulses to be heard, was against everything in their nature. And yet the humans had done it. 11 million individuals had made a choice that went against their own instincts, and they had made it together. Keith Viros turned to his advisors who floated nearby on smaller platforms. What do we know about human history? He asked, keeping his voice low. An advisor consulted a data device. They are a young species, as the ambassador said. Approximately 300,000 years of recorded biological development, civilized for only about 10,000 years. They have a history of conflict and warfare. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. They are predators who consume other organisms. Yes, I know all that. What else? The advisor paused, scrolling through more data. They have a remarkable capacity for adaptation. They have survived extreme environmental changes on their home world. They spread from one small region to cover their entire planet in less than 100,000 years. When they developed space travel, they colonized 17 worlds in less than 2 centuries. Expansion rates faster than average for carbon-based species. Much faster than expected given their technological level. Kevvaros absorbed this information. He looked back at the silent humans and this coordination ability. Is it in their biology? Unknown. Their brain structure is similar to other species that have demonstrated limited group coordination. But nothing in their physiology should allow for this level of synchronized behavior. According to our models, what they are doing should be impossible. And yet they are doing it. Yes, High Arbiter. They are. Kevvaros made a decision. He stepped forward on his platform, raising his voice so the entire chamber could hear. Ambassador Vasquez, you have shown us something unprecedented, but a demonstration of silence, impressive as it may be, is not enough to prove your worth to the Concord. Many species can perform impressive tricks. We need to understand what this means. We need to understand the implications. Elena nodded. She had expected this. What would you like to know? You claim these individuals chose this silence voluntarily. But how can we verify this? How do we know they are not being controlled by some technology we cannot detect? How do we know this is not an elaborate deception? Elena considered the question. Then she did something unexpected. She turned away from Kevvaros and faced the silent millions behind her. I need a volunteer, she said. Someone who is willing to step forward and speak to the council. Someone who can explain why they came here and why they chose to be silent. For a moment, nothing happened. The humans remained motionless. Then, somewhere in the middle of the crowd, there was movement. A figure began making its way toward the front, others stepping aside to create a path. The movement was smooth and coordinated. Each person adjusting their position. Without bumping into their neighbors, without making a sound. The volunteer reached the front and stepped onto the platform beside Elena. It was a man, middle-aged, weathered face and calloused hands. He wore the same black uniform as everyone else, but something about the way he held himself suggested a lifetime of physical labor. Please state your name and occupation, Elena said. The man cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was rough, clearly unused to public speaking. Marcus Chen. I'm a farmer from New Eden Colony. Kevvaros leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. A farmer. You traveled across interstellar space to stand in a chamber full of aliens. In complete silence, because you are a farmer. I came because I was asked, Marcus said simply. But why did you say yes? Surely you had responsibilities, crops to tend, work to do. Why would you abandon all of that to participate in this demonstration? Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He was not a philosopher or a diplomat. He was a man who worked with his hands and lived close to the earth, but he understood what Keth Viros was really asking. I don't know much about galactic politics, he said. I never met an alien before today. I've spent most of my life planting seeds and pulling weeds and hoping the weather would cooperate. That's what I know. That's who I am. He paused, looking around at the vast chamber, at the strange beings watching from their platforms. But I know about community. I know about neighbors helping neighbors when times get hard. I know about putting aside what you want so someone else can get what they need. I've seen people who had nothing give away their last meal because someone else was hungrier. His voice grew stronger as he continued. When the message came when we were told that humanity needed us, I didn't think twice. I left my crops in the field. I said goodbye to my wife and children. I got on a crowded ship and traveled for 2 days through the black of space. Crammed in with strangers who became friends. Marcus looked directly at Keth Varos. I came because I love my home. I love my family. I love my planet. And my species. And I was told that the best way to protect all of those things was to come here and be silent. So that's what I did. Not because anyone forced me, because I chose to. The chamber was utterly still. Marcus's words hung in the air. Simple and honest and impossible to dismiss, a representative of the Melodians, who had fled earlier but returned out of curiosity, spoke up. This makes no sense. You sacrificed personal comfort and economic productivity for an abstract concept for the good of a group that includes billions of people you will never meet. Why? What do you gain? Marcus turned to face the Melodian. He did not seem intimidated by the alien's strange form. I don't know if I gain anything, he said. That's not why I did it. I did it because it was right. Because when your people need you, you answer. Because that's what humans do. But individuals pursuing their own interests is the natural order, the Melodian insisted. Cooperation exists to serve individual benefit. Without personal gain, there is no motivation for action. Maybe that's true for your species, Marcus said. It's not always true for mine. Sometimes we do things for no reason except that they need to be done. Sometimes we help strangers who can never repay us. Sometimes we sacrifice everything for people we'll never meet. He shook his head, a small smile on his weathered face. I'm just a farmer. I can't explain the philosophy behind it, but I can tell you that right now, standing here in this chamber, being part of something bigger than myself, I feel more alive than I have in years. I feel connected to everyone around me. Not through any machine or technology, but through choice. Through the choice to be here, through the choice to be silent, he stepped back, returning to his place in the crowd. The humans moved to accommodate him. A single smooth motion that seemed almost choreographed, but was entirely voluntary. Elena faced the council again. Shall I call more volunteers? I have 11 million to choose from. Each one has their own story. Each one made their own choice. They are scientists and soldiers and artists and children. They come from every corner of human space. They have different beliefs, different backgrounds, different dreams for the future. The only thing they share is this moment, this choice, this silence. Keith Varos was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The condescension was gone. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that sounded almost like respect. You have made your point, Ambassador, but I must ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. This ability of yours, this capacity for voluntary coordination, for chosen unity, can it be used for war? Elena did not hesitate. Yes. A murmur ran through the council. Not a sound from the humans, but from the aliens. The Valkyrie diplomat scales shifted to a deep, worried blue. The crystalline being lattice vibrated with frequencies that indicated alarm. You answer very quickly. Keith Varro said, because it is the truth. Everything we can do for peace, we can also do for war. Kev Varos raised his hand, and the chamber fell silent. Not that the humans had been making any noise, but the aliens stopped their murmuring. You have invoked the trial of standing, he said. According to our laws, I must now ask the council to vote on whether your demonstration has proven humanity worthy of membership. He looked around at the assembled representatives. I have been High Arbiter for 400 years. I have overseen thousands of votes and thousands of debates. I have seen species admitted and species rejected, but I have never seen anything like what I witnessed today. He turned back to Elena. You came here knowing we would mock you. You came here knowing we considered you primitives. You came here. And you did not try to impress us with weapons or technology or art. Instead, you showed us something simple. You showed us 11 million people choosing to be silent. His mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh, but there was no mockery in it. And in doing so, you taught us something about ourselves. You taught us that we have become complacent. We have forgotten what a young species looks like when it reaches for the stars with both hands. We have forgotten that the greatest power in the universe is not the ability to destroy, but the ability to choose. He stood at his full height, an imposing figure, even among the diverse beings of the council. I will cast the first vote. I vote in favor of admitting humanity to the Galactic Concord with full membership and all associated rights and privileges. The chamber erupted, not in protest, but in a rushing tide of voices as representatives called out their votes. The translation system struggled to keep up with the flood of languages and communication methods. The Valkyrie in favor, the crystalline hegemony in favor, the Hive Collective in favor, the Melodians in favor, the Void Dwellers in favor. One by one, 400 species declared their support. Not a single vote against, not a single abstention. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Concord, a species was admitted unanimously by the full council. When the voting was complete, the chamber fell silent again. But this time, the silence felt different. It was not the oppressive silence of the human demonstration. It was the reverent silence of a moment that would be remembered for millennia. Elena Vasquez stood on the central platform. Surrounded by 11 million silent humans, facing 400 alien species that had just welcomed her people into the galactic community. She allowed herself a small smile. Then she spoke the words that would echo through history. On behalf of humanity, I thank the Council for this honor. We look forward to contributing to the Concord and learning from its wisdom. We come as friends. We come as partners. We come as equals. She paused, letting her words sink in. And we come in silence no more. Behind her, 11 million humans drew their first unrestricted breath since the demonstration began. Some coughed, some laughed, some wept with relief and joy. The sound was deafening after the long silence. A roar of human voices filling the ancient chamber. But to the aliens watching, it did not sound like chaos. It sounded like power. The celebration lasted for hours. After months of preparation, days of travel, and the intense pressure of the demonstration, The humans finally allowed themselves to relax. They laughed and talked and embraced strangers who had become companions through their shared experience. They wandered through the citadel in groups, marveling at the ancient structure and the strange beings that inhabited it. The aliens watched them with a mixture of fascination and weariness. These were the same creatures who had stood in perfect silence for hours. These were the same creatures who had demonstrated a capacity for coordination that defied biological logic. Now they were chattering like children, taking pictures with their primitive devices, asking questions about everything they saw. The contrast was jarring. It was also some aliens began to realize intentional. The humans were showing another side of themselves. They were showing that they could be loud as easily as they could be quiet. That they could be chaotic as easily as they could be coordinated, that they could choose either mode depending on what the situation required. High Arbiter Kath Varos observed the celebrations from his private chambers. He had requested detailed recordings of everything that had happened in the council chamber, and he watched them repeatedly, trying to understand what he had witnessed. His advisors came and went, bringing reports and analysis and speculation. The other council members were all talking about the humans. Some were excited by the possibilities of alliance with such a capable species. Others were concerned about the implications. A few were already calculating how to use the humans against their rivals. Keith Varos ignored most of it. He was focused on a single question. What had he missed? He had served on the council for 400 years. He had seen thousands of species come before the Great Chamber, seeking admission to the Concord. He had developed a sense for which species would succeed and which would fail. He could usually predict the outcome of a trial of standing within the first few minutes. He had predicted the humans would fail. He had been certain of it. They were young and primitive and small. They had nothing to offer. They were a joke. A brief entertainment before the real business of galactic governance resumed. He had been wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. And Keth Viros did not like being wrong. A message came through his communication system. Ambassador Vasquez was requesting a private audience. Keith Varos considered refusing. He was tired and confused and not in the mood for more human surprises, but curiosity won out. He accepted the request. Elena arrived at his chambers a short time later. She had changed out of her formal black uniform into simpler clothes. She looked tired, but satisfied, like someone who had completed a difficult task and could finally rest. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Keith Varos gestured for her to sit. His chambers were designed for his species with furniture that was too tall and too narrow for human comfort. But Elena perched on the edge of a seat without complaint. "You wanted to speak." Privately, Keth Varos said. "I assume you have something to say that could not be said in public." Elena nodded. "I wanted to explain something and I wanted to give you a warning." "A warning?" Keith Varos's antenna twitched with interest. "You have just been admitted to the Concord. You have achieved everything you came here to achieve. What possible warning could you need to give?" "That's exactly why I need to give it," Elena said. "Because we won. Because we showed the galaxy what humanity can do when we work together. Some people might misinterpret that demonstration." Keith Viros leaned back in his chair. "Go on." Elena took a deep breath. "What you saw today was humanity at our best. 11 million people choosing to cooperate. Choosing to sacrifice, choosing to work toward a common goal. It was beautiful and powerful, and I'm proud of every person who participated." She paused, her expression growing serious. But that's not all we are. We're also capable of terrible things. Our history is full of wars and atrocities and acts of cruelty that would horrify any civilized being. The same cooperation that allows us to stand in silent unity can also allow us to commit organized violence on a massive scale. Keith Viros was silent. Listening, I told the council that our ability could be used for war. That was true, but I didn't explain what that really means. Elena's voice dropped lower. When humans go to war, we don't fight like other species. We don't send armies to clash on battlefields while civilians go about their lives. We involve everyone. We turn our entire civilization into a war machine. Farmers grow food for soldiers. Factory workers build weapons. Scientists develop new ways to kill. Children are raised to hate the enemy. Everyone contributes. Everyone sacrifices. Everyone fights. She met Keth Virus's eyes. Your concord has lasted 11,000 years because you've learned to manage conflict between species. You have rules and treaties and systems for resolving disputes. That works because most species treat war as something separate from normal life. They fight with their militaries while their civilians continue to exist as usual. Elena shook her head slowly. That's not how we work. When humanity decides to fight, there are no civilians. There is only the war effort. Every person, every resource, every thought is directed toward victory. We become a single organism with a single purpose to destroy the enemy. Keith Varos felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. He had studied human history in preparation for this diplomatic encounter. He had read about their wars, but he had dismissed them as primitive squabbles, the kind of minor conflicts that young species always engaged in before they matured. Now, hearing Elena describe it, he began to understand why the Void Dwellers had called humanity dangerous. You are telling me this because you want to frighten me, he said. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what you've allied with, Elena replied. Humanity wants peace. We came here seeking friendship and cooperation. We have no desire to fight anyone, but if someone threatens us, if someone attacks our worlds or harms our people, we will respond with everything we have. She stood up from her seat and walked to the window of Kveros's chamber. Outside, the lights of the citadel stretched away into the distance, a testament to 11,000 years of civilization. The demonstration you saw today was a choice, she said her back to him. 11 million people chose to be silent. They chose to coordinate. They chose to work together for the good of our species. That same choice could go the other way. If humanity ever decides that war is necessary, the same cooperation you witnessed today will become something else entirely. She turned to face him. I'm not threatening you. I'm not trying to intimidate the Concord. I'm giving you information that I hope you'll never need because the best way to keep the peace is to make sure everyone understands what war would actually cost. Keith Varos was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a sound that his translation device rendered as a sigh. You are wise for such a young species, he said. Most new members of the Concord spend their first centuries trying to seem powerful. They boast about their weapons and their fleets. They make demands and threats. They act as if membership in the Concord makes them the equal of species that have been traveling between stars for millions of years. He stood up and walked to join Elena at the window. You do none of that. You come to us speaking of peace and friendship while making absolutely clear that you are capable of terrible violence. You show us your strength while asking only for respect. It is a sophisticated approach. I learned it from human history. Elena said, the strongest position in any negotiation is to want peace, but be prepared for war. Yes, I begin to see that. Keith Veros was silent for a moment, looking out at the Citadel. I have a question for you, Ambassador. In your demonstration today, you showed us what happens when 11 million humans choose to work together. But what happens when they don't? What happens when humans disagree? Elena smiled. But there was sadness in it. Then we have the other side of our nature. The wars, the conflicts, the times when cooperation fails and we turn our abilities against each other. Human history is full of those moments, too. And yet, you survived. Yes, we survived. Not because we're stronger than other species or smarter or better. We survived because somewhere always, there are humans who choose peace over war, who choose to forgive instead of revenge, who choose to rebuild instead of destroy. She turned to face Keith Veros fully. That's the real reason I wanted to speak with you privately. Not to threaten you with what humanity could do in war, but to tell you what we really want. We want to learn from the Concord. We want to understand how you've maintained peace for 11,000 years. We want to take those lessons back to our own people so that maybe someday we won't need the capacity for total war anymore. Keith Veros studied her for a long moment. His species was skilled at reading body language, even the body language of alien species. He saw no deception in Elena Vasquez. He saw only sincerity and perhaps a deep weariness. You carry a heavy burden, Ambassador, he said. You represent a species that is capable of great beauty and great destruction. You must constantly balance those two natures. Showing enough strength to earn respect while restraining enough to avoid conflict. Yes, Elena agreed. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's necessary. I think I understand now why your species developed this ability for voluntary cooperation, Keith Veros said slowly. It is not a weapon, though it can be used as one. It is a survival mechanism, a way for a species capable of destroying itself to instead choose to work together. Elena nodded. We learned it the hard way. Through thousands of years of wars and conflicts and near extinctions, we learned that the only way to survive was to find something worth cooperating for. Family, community, tribe, nation, species. Each time we expanded the circle of cooperation, we became stronger. And now you are expanding it again. Keith Veros said to include the galaxy. We hope so. That's why we came here. Not to conquer or dominate, to join, to be part of something larger than ourselves. Keith Veros made a decision. He walked to a cabinet in the corner of his chamber and retrieved something from within. It was a small object, a crystal that glowed with internal light. This is a memory stone, he said. My species uses them to record important moments. I have one from my first day as High Arbiter 400 years ago. I have another from the birth of my children. I was going to create one today to record the trial of standing because I expected it to be amusing. He held the stone out to Elena. Instead, I want to give this to you as a gift and as a request. Elena took the stone carefully. What request? Record your memories of today. Not just the demonstration, but everything. Your hopes and fears, your strategy and your doubts. The things you told me in private and the things you will never tell anyone. Keith Veros met her eyes. And someday when humanity has been part of the Concord for 1,000 years, share those memories with whoever leads your people. Then let them see what this moment really meant. Let them understand the burden you carried and the choices you made. Elena looked at the stone in her hands. It was warm to the touch, pulsing gently with light. She did not know how to use it, but she could feel its importance. I will, she said. Thank you. Keith Varos nodded. Then, surprising both of them, he extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Elena had taught it to him during their preparation meetings, explaining that humans used physical contact to establish trust. She took his hand and shook it. Welcome to the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Vasquez. Keith Vero said, I hope your species finds what it is looking for among the stars. So do I, Elena replied. She left his chambers. A short time later, walking through corridors that were slowly emptying as the human celebrants returned to their ships. The demonstration was over. The vote was cast. Humanity was now part of the galactic community. But Elena knew that the real work was just beginning. Membership in the Concord was only the first step. Now came the hard part, proving that humanity could live up to its potential. Showing the galaxy that the cooperation they had witnessed was not a one-time trick, but a fundamental part of who they were. She found Marcus Chen waiting for her outside the main chamber. The farmer from New Eden was leaning against a wall, looking tired, but content. Ambassador, he said, straightening up. I wanted to thank you. Before I head back to my ship. Thank me. You were the one who stood up in front of the entire council and explained what this all meant. Marcus shrugged. I just told the truth about why I came, about what it felt like to be part of something bigger. Elena smiled. That's exactly what we needed. Not a diplomat giving a speech, but an ordinary person explaining why they chose to participate. You did more for humanity today than you'll ever know. Marcus looked embarrassed. I'm just a farmer. You're a human, Elena said. That's enough. That's always enough. She watched him walk away, heading toward the docking bays where transport ships were preparing to take the volunteers back to their homes. 11 million people who had traveled across the stars to stand in silence for a few hours. 11 million people who would now return to their ordinary lives, their farms and factories and families. But they would carry this memory with them forever. They would tell their children and grandchildren about the day they stood in the council chamber and showed the galaxy what humanity could do. And those children would grow up knowing that they were part of something larger, something powerful, something worth fighting for. Elena turned and looked back at the council chamber. It was empty now, the alien representatives returning to their own ships and stations. But the memory of what had happened there would echo through the ages. She thought about what Kth Varos had said, about the burden she carried, about the balance between strength and restraint, about the long journey that humanity had ahead of it. It was true. All of it. The responsibility was enormous. The stakes were impossibly high. One wrong move could undo everything they had achieved today. But Elena was not afraid. She had seen what her people could do when they chose to work together. She had seen farmers and scientists and soldiers standing side by side in perfect silence. She had seen 11 million individuals become one organism. Not through force or technology, but through choice. If humanity could do that, they could do anything. She pulled out her communication device and composed a message to Earth. It was short and simple. It's done. We're in. Come home soon. She sent the message and put the device away. Then she walked to the observation deck to watch the human ships beginning their journey back to their worlds. The citadel of voices stretched out before her. A monument to 11,000 years of civilization. Soon, humanity would leave its mark on this place, too. They would send ambassadors and scientists and traders. They would learn from the ancient species of the Concord and share their own unique perspective. They would grow and change. And become something new. But they would never forget this day, the day they walked forth in complete silence and taught the galaxy to respect them. In the archives of the Galactic Concord, the event would be recorded simply as the silence. Scholars would debate its significance for millennia. Some would call it the most important demonstration in Concord history. Others would focus on the practical implications, the way it changed humanity's standing among the stars. But those who were there, who witnessed it firsthand, knew the truth. The silence was not about politics or strategy or galactic affairs. It was about 11 million people making a choice. It was about human nature at its finest. The ability to set aside individual desires for the good of the whole. Not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. For 10,000 years afterward, no species would threaten human space. Not because they feared human weapons or human technology. Because they remembered what happened when the Council laughed at humanity. They remembered the silence. They remembered what it meant. And they remembered always that the quietest beings in the chamber were often the most dangerous. Some lessons only need to be taught once.